Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who's joining today. My name is Leanne, and we're here to talk about the Lightning Process Builder. So hopefully everyone was able to join the GoToWebinar. The agenda today, we're really excited to be here and talk about overall as a product, the Lightning Process Builder, and what you can do with it and what it looks like, where to access it in your Salesforce, how to start building with it. We're going to show you a quick demo, a short and sweet demo highlighting some of the really exciting power of the Process Builder and what you can do that, for those of you who've been building in Salesforce for a while, should be pretty exciting because you couldn't do it in the past. We have the product manager, the owner of Process Builder, Shelly Ersig, we're going to introduce her in just a moment, but she's going to cover hot topics. So Process Builder definitely did not enter silently into the Salesforce community. So we have a lot of questions, a lot of really exciting use cases that people are starting to explore with Process Builder, as well as questions about the roadmap and functionality and kind of some hot topics that are out there on Twitter and Success and Idea Exchange. Shelly's also going to cover the roadmap, so what we can look for in the next few releases, of course, Safe Harbor, as well as the overall product kind of ideology of the Process Builder and the direction that it's going in. And then we're going to have QA. So we're doing QA a little bit differently on this webinar. As always, please don't wait until the end to ask the question. But the difference here is we'd really like everyone to ask their questions in the Success community. So we have the bit.ly here at the bottom, the Automation Success group. That is a community within, or a group within Success. And we're asking that everyone, as much as possible, ask those questions in the Success community for a couple of reasons. That for all of our products that have groups, or all of our product areas that have groups, that's where the PMs hang out. That's where the technical experts hang out, both Salesforce employees that are technical experts as well as community members that are experts. So not just for this webinar, but just in general, I really suggest finding those groups that are relevant for different areas you're interested in and posting questions there. But specifically today, we will be taking questions from that group at the end. So please post, and if you can remember, please do hashtag Process Builder and make it really easy to find those questions later on. But the Automation Success group in the Salesforce Success community. So as I mentioned on the agenda, we will be covering some future release, some roadmap information and details around Process Builder. So of course, if you've ever joined any Salesforce presentation before, that comes with a Safe Harbor slide. So all purchasing decisions for Salesforce should be made based on currently available technologies, not based on any forward-looking statements or technologies that are not currently GA. So please keep that in mind as we go through, especially further on in the presentation today, focusing on our roadmap. So my name is Leanne Templeman. I'm a developer evangelist with Salesforce. I specifically focus and work a lot with our admin and advanced admin community, and so I'm especially excited, I think, for Process Builder and the implications for what you can do with clicks and not code, and how much power it's giving to the community to build on Salesforce. And I'm joined by Shelly Ersig, who is our rockstar PM who owns Process Builder and delivered Process Builder. And Shelly, I'll let you introduce yourself as well.
Hi, thanks. Shelly Ersig, and I'm a Director of Product Management here at Salesforce. And I've, with actually multiple teams here at Salesforce, we got not quite free reign, but we got a lot of freedom to focus on this product and to go after the goal of giving button-click admins and developer admins, frankly, more powerful tools to use without having to write code. And so it's just been a pleasure to be able to work on this and to continue to iterate on it. So looking forward to sharing some more information with you.
Awesome. So again, I'm going to keep mentioning this because it is different from how we often do QA on webinars. Please pull this up in another tab while we have it up. Please join the Workflow Automation group. Shelly hangs out in this group. Bill, the PM for Flow, hangs out in this group, along with a lot of other technical experts. So please pull this group up and post your questions there, and we'll be going through them at the end of the webinar. So Shelly, why don't you tell us, to get started, why don't you tell us about the Process Builder, or about Process Builder?
Great. The Process Builder is really our next generation workflow tool, and It's enabling more people across organizations to automate their business faster. It's easy to use because it gives you a picture of the process as you build it, and it really does put the power of code in your hands with just a few clicks. It has a modern interface that guides you through a graphical picture of your process so that you can see your process, share it, and collaborate with colleagues on it. So one way to think about Process Builder is to think of it as workflow rules plus more actions, more flexibility to operate across objects and different kinds of objects, and the ability to combine what would have been multiple rules into a single process, and all of this with a graphical interface to build and view your process. So let's take a quick look at some of the key features that make Process Builder so powerful. I mentioned you can combine multiple criteria into a single process, and so if you're familiar with workflow rules, you can think of that as essentially combining multiple workflow rules into a single process. So what we were trying to solve here for you is we heard from our customers that you were cobbling together sometimes dozens, sometimes more, sometimes a frightening number of individual workflow rules in order to really map what your process did in the real world. And so we wanted to provide a tool that would let you combine them so that you could see your process really sort of as it works in your business. So that was an important thing to work on for us. It also gives you the flexibility to operate on any related record. Now, what does that mean, any related record? That means you can update child records where you can't with workflow. And I'll tell you the secret behind this if you don't know already. It's because Process Builder is built on Flow. It's built on the Flow engine. And this is what gives us a lot of this power and flexibility to operate across record relationships. The Process Builder also has powerful new actions. You can create a record declaratively, so you don't have to write Apex code for that anymore. You can trigger chatter posts that include field references to the records that you're working with. Those can include topics and at mentions. Your process, a part of your process could be to submit a record for approval automatically. So I know this comes into play for a lot of you when you've got really important approval processes that you want to make sure stay in place, and you don't want to have to rely on a user, because we're all human, potentially forgetting to hit that submit button. So this can be the answer for that. Now, processes can also trigger flows, which this gets you sort of an escape to more complex logic. So if the Process Builder logic isn't sufficient to cover your entire use case, you can kick off a flow, and flow can extend that logic. You can also fire off quick actions. Now, you may know these as publisher actions. So if you've got those customized actions in your org, you can connect those to your process already. And finally, you can trigger Apex with Process Builder. Now, this really lets you extend outside the Salesforce domain, talk to external data sources, do more complex processing outside, but still be able to trigger that process and have that connected to a declarative process within Salesforce. So all of these previously required that you wrote code. And now our goal is really that they're accessible to all button-click admins. So before we really dive in, let's go over some quick FAQs. Okay, the Process Builder was GA in Spring 15, so that is available in all DE, EE, UE orgs and further up the chain there. It is not available in PE as an add-on the way that workflow is, so you do have to start with some of the other levels of orgs. Okay, it supports all the latest stable browser versions, which means you can use it with IE, you can use it with Firefox, you can use it with Chrome, but it needs to be the latest version because it's latest technology. So essentially what this is saying is don't use an old version of IE. It's not going to work that well for you. So I mentioned this earlier. Processes are really flows under the hood. So right now you're going to see this surface in chain sets, in packaging, and in error messaging. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So when you go to package these up or move them from your sandbox to your production org, you're going to see it referred to as a flow. And lastly, workflow rules remain available. So workflow rules are not going away. We do see Process Builder is ultimately replacing workflow rules, but that's not going to be anytime soon. So just wanting you to know that that's there for you and you continue using them. So now I think Leanne is going to give you a demo and show you how Process Builder works.
Absolutely. So I'm going to just take you through building a very quick process. We talk a lot about using processes for business automation in place of workflows, but you can also use it to enforce data quality or to enforce internal processes that maybe you would have had to use, or definitely you would have had to use code in the past. So the process I'd like to build is a way to ensure that when an account address is updated, the contact is updated as well. So if everyone can see my screen, okay. So I just clicked New Process. My API name is automatically populated for me. I'm going to say update all contact. And we're going to start defining what we would like to happen in this process. So the first thing I'm going to do is define my object. So when this is allowing me to specify which object this process will look at to start the process. So I'm going to look at accounts because I said that I'd like to have all of my contact addresses updated whenever their account is updated. Then I'm going to start this on account because while we're acting on contacts, we're actually going to be, the criteria is going to live on the account. We do want this to be whenever a record is created or edited. If you haven't built a process yet, some of this language, if you've built workflow rules, will be familiar, but then there's a lot more that you can do with it. So I've started building my process. I can see here I've got the option to add criteria. So now that I've determined where this process should look, I'm going to go ahead and define what it should be looking at. So I'll call this account address change. And now I'm going to look at what my criteria should be. So I've got all of my account fields available to me here, and I would like to look at when the billing street is changed. Add that in here. That's when this will fire. So we do have the operator option. This is new in Spring 15, right, Shelley? The is changed operator, which means that we don't have to actually write a formula to determine that it was changed. We can say the operator is changed, and as soon as it's changed, then we want to fire this action group. I'm going to go ahead and click Save. So now that I've defined my criteria here, then I can determine what those actions should be. Now, if we had selected initially that we wanted the object to be looked at when it was created versus when it was created and edited, we'd have scheduled actions available as well. Because we're looking at when it's edited, we have our immediate actions available. So Shelley just talked through all of the different types of actions, and it's a it's a short list here, but there's a huge amount of power for what you can do with these. So we're going to actually update records, but just to call out for those admins in the community or people who have built workflow rules before or had to start to build triggers in the past to accomplish some of these, we could create new records if we wanted to. There's a lot that we can do with these actions, but what we're going to do now is update records. And this doesn't only allow you to update records that are, say, related or through lookup fields. We can actually update child records, which is huge. Oops. I'll try to type more quietly. I think I just got a comment that I sound like Thumper when I'm typing. So what we have here is our account. So we could update the account itself if we wanted to. We see here if we click on the account, then we can determine or we can define the fields that we'd like to update on the account. We can also scroll down and look at related objects, including child objects. So contacts, we're going to bring that in here. So our object is accounts contacts. And we'd like to update the street of the contact. So what we're doing here is saying I would like to set the object variable on all of these child contacts on the account. Now, I could populate a static value if I wanted to, but I can also click this little icon here, and that gives me the option to look at that account and find what value I'd like to populate. So we're going to make that the billing street because that is the field that we defined as changing in our criteria. So I'm going to save. So this is a very simple process. We have one criteria. We actually just have one action. We could add multiple actions. We could have different criteria branches or action branches. But just to show how powerful this is, we're going to go ahead and activate this now. So now that this is active, let's go ahead and look at, I've got my account list view here. Actually, it's okay. My contact list view is what I meant. So you can see my contact list view here with the addresses. So let's pick one that has a few different addresses. So I've got, it looks like different addresses for multiple different contacts for United Oil and Gas. So I'm going to open this up and we're going to update the address here for United Oil and Gas. So let's say it's now 4545 Grant Street. Go ahead and click Save. So we've updated that on the account record, but when we update here, we can see that all of those child contacts, all those contacts as well, updated. So that's a very simple use case, but that's an incredibly powerful process we were able to accomplish in just a few minutes. This is a brand new blank dev org. Nothing was built in advance, and that's something that definitely would have required code in the past, but now in just a few clicks, in just a few minutes, you can start to implement processes like this for your business processes as well as for data cleanliness and data processes in your Salesforce. So I'm going to switch back over to slides. So I love that demo because we actually had to build triggers in the past to enforce data cleanliness in orgs that I was a part of. And so being able to build that really clearly and really quickly is really meaningful. So Shelley, I know that you have more information you want to share with us both about the release of Process Builder as well as the roadmap. So I'm going to turn it back over to Shelley.
Great, great. And this is a funny little slide, but I wanted to take a moment before we dive in further to tell you a little bit about our philosophy on delivering this kind of functionality to you, to our customers. As soon as we have something that adds business value, we want to get it to you so that you can tell us how it's working for you. Our way of doing this is to build, release, and iterate on what we've built. And what makes our job so awesome is that we can build cool stuff that lets you guys do even cooler stuff. And essentially, we can't wait to get this into your hands. So we really don't want to sit behind a curtain for multiple releases until everything's super polished. We want to give you access to new functionality and new power as often as we can, because your use cases and your experience really feed back into our prioritization and our planning processes, and help us think, and we think do a better job of building tools that are more useful to you. So we just want you to know that just because the Process Builder is a pretty shiny new tool, it doesn't mean we're done. We're still building this baby. So with that, why don't we start tackling some of the hot topics that have come up since Process Builder was released. Well, the first one is, gosh, now we have 4 different workflow tools on the platform, right? So which one do I use, all right? This can be a little bit overwhelming because some of the functionality overlaps. And so our doc team has built a fantastic guide with a feature matrix that can help, and the URL is listed there on the slide, so please check that out. I'll give you kind of a quick overview, but I think that documentation will help you decide based on your use cases. So you want to use Process Builder when you want to combine essentially multiple if-then statements that fire either immediate or scheduled actions, when records are created or when they're changed. Workflow rules will also fire on if-then statements, but only on a single if-then statement. But there is a gap between what Workflow rules does and what Process Builder can do right now, and that gap is something you should know about, and it has to do with scheduled actions. So with Workflow rules, you can create scheduled actions, and you can have multiple schedules in the same rule. And right now with Process Builder, you can only have one schedule. That's something we're working on, and it will eventually be there, but just know that that gap is there. The other one is not so much a gap, but about the way that you accomplish things. So with Workflow rules, we do have a declarative outbound message action. In Process Builder, because of the feedback we got about how people were using that outbound message and what they really wanted to do, what we said was we're not going to make a declarative outbound message action for Process Builder. We're going to give you access to flow and to code via Apex so that you can essentially customize that the way that you like. So those are two areas to be aware of. But with workflow rules, again, it's more of a one at a time rather than being able to have multiple rules combined into one process. Approvals. So approvals is a little more clear, right? You're using that, we can use that for routing things like time off requests and deal discounts or any other records that need a sort of management approval. So let's talk about flow. Flow is extremely powerful, and as I said, it's the engine underneath Process Builder. Now you want to use flow when you want to do things like create wizards that have screens. You want to gather input from customers or from users and then operate on that input, or for more complex processes. So when you want to do more complex branching logic, such as, let's think about if you want to evaluate if certain conditions are true, and then you have a resulting set of records, and then you want to evaluate that for further conditions, and iterate and sort through that, then you want to use flow. When you want to operate on batches of records or for bulk use cases, you want to use flow or Apex. So this guide with the feature matrix can really help you determine which is the right tool for you. All right, more hot topics. So let's talk about a big one here, bulk use cases and platform limits. So Process Builder is a brand new tool, right? And it's enabling more users to automate work in ways that they couldn't previously without using code. And with that new power, it's exposing the platform limits to users who may not have encountered them before. Now, on top of that, Process Builder is not optimized for bulk use cases yet. We're planning to improve the performance in this area, but we want you to know it's a complex problem. The platform limitations have always governed Flow and Apex. And by offering this new flexibility to operate across object relationships that the Process Builder brings, we start exposing and essentially subjecting the user, processes and users who normally wouldn't have been subjected to these kinds of limits. We get subjected to the limits that workflow rules are not, essentially, because with workflow rules you can't traverse these relationships and operate on all the related records that the Process Builder can. So the real difference here, though, is that Flow and Apex provide users who are technically sophisticated enough to use those tools methods to do effective workarounds so that they can manage their way through the limits with either code or with pseudocode. Now for Process Builder, our goal is to abstract away this type of complexity so that our users don't have to think about it in the same way. And we want to solve as many of the bulk use cases behind the scenes as we can, but know that there will always be limits. So we're going to try to iterate on this and try to optimize for more bulk usage. It's going to take us a while, and know that we won't be able to cover every use case. But meanwhile, workflow rules, Flow, and Apex are in place for that. And we're also going to step up our educational efforts to help users determine whether Process Builder is appropriate for their use case. So, how do you find out more? Definitely read the Process Limits Help Doc. That's going to ground you in what the limits are across the platform. There are also some, and actually I think this is probably the best source of assistance, is the success community. There's some fantastic blog posts and discussions of this and how to work with limits on the platform on the community site. So take a look at that as well, and then stay tuned for more help in this area. Okay, don't want to forget about formulas. So Process Builder has formula support, but doesn't yet have full formula support. So we're working on this, and it's another area where we're going to be iterating and releasing functionality as we can. So it's important to check out the process limitations doc and the formula guide, which is very helpful in order to plan for your use cases. I'll talk more about formulas later as we discuss our roadmap. I think we have even more hot topics. Leanne, you want to take this one?
Yeah, definitely. So we have questions that have come up, and I think if you have a question about functionality in Process Builder, and if you are trying to accomplish something and you're trying to kind of figure out how to do that, I encourage you, as Shelly said, to ask the community, because there's some questions out there that you can definitely do, like creating tasks. So you can create tasks, but it's not under the action of create event or create task. It's actually would be filed under create new record. So I just bring that up as an example of, some of the language is going to be a little bit different than workflow rules or than maybe what you've done in the past. So continue to explore. For example, you can update. So if you want to create a task or an event, use the create record type of action. You can also update the record on which, or the object on which you're acting. So you actually just click, if you're creating an action for, that was another question that's come up, and if you're creating a question or creating an action to update the record that you are already looking at. So for our example, it would have been on, can I update something else about the account when the account address itself changes? And you can definitely do that. You would just navigate to that by clicking on that object name when you're creating the action versus clicking on the little arrow lookup window to the right. So some of it's a little bit different than maybe what you've been used to in the past with workflow, but as Shelly said, when you have questions, continue to ask on the Success community, because as both we are present in the community, the PMs are present in the community, but then also as your peers and as other technical experts in the community are starting to build more and more, you can see kind of examples of how people are using Process Builder. One question that's come up is, where are my scheduled actions? So as Shelly mentioned, processes are flows. So when you're looking for your scheduled actions and where they're living, where that queue lives, it's actually going to be in flows. If you go into your setup area, if you're in a developer org, or if you're in an org with Process Builder and flows turned on, you can actually look at it, and it's in flows. And if you go into, it's a section of scheduled and paused, I believe it's called. So they live there.
Yeah, paused and waiting interviews.
Paused and waiting. Sorry, I always paused and waiting interviews, but it's going to be in that screen there under flows. So that's another, you kind of have to poke around and look a little bit, but that's where those scheduled actions are living. And as you're starting to build in Process Builder and going through tutorials or building in your sandbox and starting to accomplish different business use cases, if you run into something that doesn't seem quite right, if you think you found a bug, definitely log a case with Salesforce support so we can go ahead and track that and have that documented. So if you do think you found something, please reach back out to Salesforce and keep that communication open, both through Success as well as logging cases. So let's talk about, I know I'm always excited to hear about, and I'm sure our audience is really excited to hear about, kind of the big picture and what we can expect in the future with process automation and with Process Builder.
Great. So we're going to continue to iterate on the power that we make available in the Process Builder, but just as critically, we're going to continue to iterate on the user experience and the usability of Process Builder with the goal of providing power in a very simplified, transparent way. So we're not all the way there yet, and I want to talk about how we get there and really share our vision for where we think process automation on the Salesforce platform goes. And it starts with more declarative power and more logic, more point-and-click power. And that's things like optimizing for bulk use cases, improving and expanding formula functionality, offering more flexible logic. So right now in the Process Builder, when you hit one of those criteria nodes, and if one of those criteria nodes, that condition is true, you go to the right and you execute those actions and you stop. Well, in the future, what we'd like to do is allow you to have a choice about whether or not you stop, whether or not you go back down to that main branch and say, well, I'd actually like to evaluate if more than one of those criteria are true. That, I think, is going to open up a lot more use cases as well. And so those types of things are very high on our list to continue iterating, continue providing more power in that area. So talk a little bit more about how we trigger processes. Right now, you can only trigger a process when a record is created or a record is edited. But the real world doesn't work like that. And actually, what we want to build, and we've started on just a very tiny bit of progress on the infrastructure for this, is an eventing system. So we want to allow you to pick off processes on all sorts of events including custom events that you have. But I'll give you some examples. So, for example, you could have a process that waits for a message from SAP, and then when it receives that message, or that text or those fields contain some specified criteria, then that process could fire. It could listen to a Twitter feed, for example, and then, if it's hashtag I'm having a problem with X product, that might trigger a process that then chats to the support team, creates a case, and starts a follow-up with that customer on Twitter, right? Or trigger processes when external objects, something happens with an external object, or based on some of the data in an external object. So we're starting to lay the groundwork for that to really expand the way that you can automate across the platform. Now, with that, you're going to need a lot more tools to help you do this in terms of understanding where your processes are, troubleshooting, monitoring your processes. And so our vision really is that there's a process central dashboard that lets you see where your scheduled actions are. You're going to have potentially flows and processes that are longer running, that are maybe stopped and need to be resumed, and essentially just give you the output of what the processes are doing all in one central place. So we're going to work on getting there by iterating over improving the error messaging, improving the logging, and then cobbling all that together, and eventually having this nice dashboard where it's all in one place. Okay, integrated approvals. So definitely want to integrate approvals and have you be able to build your approval processes right in the process builder, have that integrated as part of your process, be able to drag those into your processes. And by using the technology that we've got, combining the existing workflow functionality, existing approval functionality, and flow, we think we're going to be able to give you a lot more flexible logic there. Okay, and lastly, tool convergence. So our vision is really that you go to one tool to automate on the platform, and it's not that it does everything in one go, but we imagine that you can go to Process Builder as a start and do much of your work there. And if you find that you need to do more complex processing, we call it the graduate to flow button, is that there'll be something that you click, and that will probably take you into something like a more advanced view, and then you would have more flow functionality from there. And it extends further out when you have hooks out to Apex and web service callouts and things like that. So our goal is really to bring all of the functionality together in a more seamless way. So that's the big picture. Now let's talk about what we're working on right now, because I think this will answer maybe some more immediate questions as well. Okay, the big one's formulas. So we need more of them and in more places, right? So what we're working on, essentially, we've been working on getting in the functions isChanged, isNew, and prior value that are very popular rudimentary functions that we didn't support. So working on that now, and providing system variables and formulas. Okay, this is a big one. Field updates with formulas. So essentially, you can do dynamic data assignment when we release this, and we're getting very close to being able to release this. So if you want to assign a date to the day that this process fired, +7, things like that, you'll be able to now do that. We're working through support for multi-select pick lists and criteria, which is another asked for action. You'll be able to use them in formulas and in quick actions. So previously, they were only supported when you were creating or updating, a record. Okay, another very, very powerful thing, and I think this got out of order, so I'll say the first one. You can delete processes without waiting 12 hours soon, and that means flow too. So we're working on this. It's going to be successful. We're going to be able to deliver this pretty soon to you. We know that this is a pain point. There was a good reason for the 12-hour wait, but we're able to handle that in a different way. Basically, we didn't want to have people interrupting processes that were in flight, but there are other ways to handle that. So as long as you've deactivated your process or your flow and you don't have any time-based or sort of scheduled actions out there waiting, then you're going to be able to delete that process or that flow. So And then a really big one, and this really kind of helps us tell the story of how we're bringing flow functionality and that power into the process builder in a simplified way, is that you're going to be able to filter records when you update. So right now in the process builder, you can update records, but as in Leanne's example, you'd be updating every child record. So it's an all or nothing thing. Now when you use flow, you can actually query and decide which records you want to update. And we're bringing that power into the process builder. So I think that that's going to help people refine the way that they're able to do their processes. And finally, more details in error messaging. Now, this is a joint effort with the flow team to continue to add more details in error messaging, add more details in logging, and then with the process team to be able to make that accessible to folks who are using Process Builder as well. This is going to be a steel thread. We're going to continue working on making this better because we know that it's not easy for you to figure out what your processes have done sometimes. So we need to do a better job there, and it's a top of mind for us. So with that, I think Leanne has some resources for how to help those of you who haven't used Process Builder get started.
Awesome. Thank you, Shelley. So I'm sure everyone's really excited about what the roadmap holds for Process Builder, and of course the first way to get it started with all these new features that are going to be coming out is to get comfortable and to get proficient in Process Builder and learn how to use it for your business and in your org. So the best way to do that is to go directly to Trailhead. Actually, the best way to learn Salesforce is to go directly to Trailhead. So if you haven't checked out Trailhead yet, it's developer.salesforce.com/Trailhead. If you know anyone who's interested in getting started with Salesforce, if you are interested in building more on Salesforce or learning about different product areas or building your skills on Salesforce, this is the #1 place to go. We're continuing to add modules constantly to Trailhead to help you learn different areas of the platform. And so there is a process builder module in Trailhead, so I really encourage everyone to check that out. If you're interested in Process Builder specifically and starting there, you can go directly to that module. That bit.ly is at the bottom here, Process Builder Trailhead. But also just getting started with Trailhead, starting to earn the badges, starting to go through those exercises and challenges in different functional areas of Salesforce. So we're really excited about Trailhead. We're all using it, and so we're really excited for our community to use it as well. So we did promise that we would go to questions, and so hopefully, I know I saw some questions coming through on the chat. Hopefully we're going to switch over to the Success Workflow Automation group and answer some questions there and start to address what's coming up. So Shelley, did you see any questions that you'd like to address on the Success community group? So it looks like a number of great questions came through, some around order of execution, some around roadmap. Is there any in particular that you'd like to address, Shelley, on the webinar for the entire audience?
Sure. There are actually a couple in the webinar chat I wanted to address and maybe just clarify something you said. And if you don't mind, could you flip to the process builder itself? There was a question about whether, and I've seen this question other places, about whether or not you can update the record that you're on in Process Builder. And I think the reason that question is coming up is because we need to rev the usability there. It's not obvious how you do that, but you certainly can. And so I just wanted to show that really quickly, and then also just let people know that that is the #1 thing on our usability list to make a little more transparent of how you do that. So we can show that now, but if not, we can just move to other questions.
So
post a screenshot.
Yeah, I can show it right now. So if you can see my screen, we are on that same action or that same process that we built earlier, the account. So we are looking at, this is a process that lives on the account object. And so if we wanted to update a record, we'd select Update Record. So what we saw before was going here to find our related objects. Now if we wanted to update the account object, so that's the account on which the process is, that's the account that we're looking at with the criteria, or the object we're looking at with the criteria, we would actually click the actual account, the name of the object here, and then I see I've selected that object and then save. So once it's a little bit, that confused me also. It doesn't go through the same click path as if you were to look at how to update a related. But we have account there, so then say we wanted to update.
Then you find your fields below.
Yeah, the shipping stream, for example, and we would still be able to do if we wanted to populate it now, because it would be the same for the lookup window here for populating the field, right? We'd still, or would we? Yeah, so there we go. So we would still look at billing street. So that's how we do it. So you definitely can update the object that you're looking at. It's just the click path is a little bit different.
Right. Yeah, thanks. So that's definitely something we're going to iterate on. There's a few places where, we're trying to make this as simple and clear as possible. We're not succeeding right off the bat. I think we got, partway there with lots of stuff, so we're going to circle back around and make things a little easier. It's great feedback to get that feedback. That helps us understand really what's impacting you, and helps us, be able to feel like, hey, maybe that's something we should focus on first. So, great. Here's a question. Can you create another decision point to the right of another decision point? This is asked by Steve Schneider, and I've gotten that question a lot. And that's something that is going to be sort of further out on the roadmap. But I see what you're saying. So right now, if you have the process builder on and you've got criteria, you go to the right, you do the actions, and that's it, you stop. And that idea of I check to see if some criteria is true, and I might do some actions, or I might check with more criteria and see if that is true and condition further on that. That's what you need to use flow for. So you can't actually, you basically get separate conditions, but you can't cobble conditions together in the same row like you can with flow. So that's when we talk about saying, you've got sort of use cases that require a little more complex logic and conditioning. We say flow is the right tool for that. Now we may get there with process builder. That's something that's definitely on our radar. We just want to make sure as we add functionality that we can keep things as simple as possible. But right now, use flow for that. I'm scrolling through. Do you see another good question, Leanne?
Let me switch over.
Okay. I found one. Ricardo had one, and this is a frequently asked question as well. When is it going to be possible to remove, add, or move around a criterion in an existing process builder? Yeah, so it's a really obvious one, and we totally get how useful this is, and it's one we'd like to do. So we know that you'd like to be able to move around the criteria, reorder them, and just drag and drop them somehow and reorder them, move actions around and things like that. And it's really just a factor of time. We're just not there yet. And just so you know how we're thinking about this, something like that we know is really useful and makes you more efficient when you're building processes and helps you go faster. We are leaning towards getting you more functionality and more power to do more things. And we've got this stack of sort of efficiency things like this suggestion here, but we're waiting we're weighting our decisions based on letting you do more. And then we will circle around to help things be kind of a little more efficient. So, it's always a trade-off with these things with product development, but this is most definitely on our roadmap, and we know that it will be very useful to you.
Awesome.
Leanne, do you have one?
So I'm looking through, so I'm not sure if you touched on this or not yet, around person accounts, that we still got a couple more questions that came through.
Okay, I haven't seen those questions yet, but person accounts. So it doesn't currently work with person accounts. There's something, but that's not an intentional thing. There's something around personal accounts. I believe there's an open issue that they're working on the personal accounts side, or potentially on the flow side. And when those issues are resolved, then person accounts will become available. So we're not specifically blocking working with person accounts. I think we have an open issue. I'm not sure if there's a known issue out on the site, but I can try to update that once I have a little more information on the status. I think that's going to be available fairly soon.
One question we got specifically around the demo was the ability to update more than one field at a time. So you definitely can. We showed kind of very straightforward, just updating that street field. But both with updating records as well as with creating records, you can set the values for multiple fields, both based on other records, so that lookup that we saw when we're looking to the account address and using that to create the contact address, but you can also set like a static value, for example, or set a Boolean value as well. So you definitely can update more than one field at a time.
Thanks. We got a question about the different schedules for scheduled actions and the difference sort of between workflow rules and process builder. So maybe I'll touch on that again just to make sure people understood. So with workflow rules, you can create time-based workflow actions, and those can have multiple schedules and be attached to the same rule. So for example, my schedule might be 5 days after this rule fires, assign this, update a field on this task, and then 10 days afterwards do something else, and that's in the same rule. With Process Builder, you can only have one schedule right now, and so that's the difference. Now there's ways around this, and if you check out the success community, I'm sure someone's posted this, but there are definitely ways around this in that don't work for all use cases, but can work for some use cases. That said, we're going to be allowing you to have multiple schedules. It's something that's high on our list to work on. We're not working on it right this moment, but it's definitely in our medium-term plan. How do we debug process errors? Is there a way to trace the process steps while it runs for a given event? So that's a very good question. Now, right now, there are not great tools for that. You can look in the debug logs, and if you set the debug logs to fine or finest, I believe, if you set your debug log to finest, you can see more detail about what the process did. We're going to be adding more logging so that you can see more detail than what's there now. The other thing we're doing is there's an email that goes out when either a flow or a process has an error and hits a fault. You get an email message that lets you know that process failed. In that email, there's very little detail in there currently. You'll see in the next couple releases much more detail that'll highlight the elements that the process or flow went through and details about the process at those elements, and in an effort to help you step through and trace the whole process. So this is something we're iterating on. We don't feel like you have sufficient debug information right now. There's some out there. And again, look to support or this community to try to get help with that. And we know that that's a gap that we're working really hard to fill right away.
So we did get a question, and this is something that kind of relates to a larger question that has come up in the community around packaging processes and what that looks like. So you can definitely package processes. You would find them when you're creating a package under Flow. Exactly the same for change nets. So one question, I know today you can't include Process Builder processes and manage packages. Is there, Shelley, as far as the roadmap for that, is there anything you can share with us around the ability for flows or processes to be included in a managed package?
So they can be included in managed packages right now. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what the question is. So you can include them in managed packages.
Okay.
I think where there's been some question is if it's in a managed package, then how does someone alter the process? Because the definition of a managed package, like when you get Apex in a managed package, we don't let the recipient, that is protected. The recipient can't touch the code and change it, right? And so that's a function of the managed package, is that then you can't change or customize the process or the flow. So that's something that across the platform people are thinking about. We don't have something in motion right now to address that, but we understand that it's a little different use case. What we almost want is something where it's a managed package that lets you access certain components and customize those for your org. So we don't have that yet, but that's definitely on our radar. Hopefully that's answering your question.
Yes, that answers the question.
If not, repost.
I hadn't tried to create one in a managed package, so when I saw the question around that, I did not know that we could do that, or I hadn't tried to do it yet. So let's see. Some questions around calling Apex. Do you want to talk at all about calling Apex from a process action around like the class specific annotations needed, or maybe direct everyone to kind of the best place to find those resources around how to call Apex from a process builder action?
Sure. I'd direct you to basically to the help documentation. There are sections on that, and also to the flow documentation around Apex plugins to get a picture of how the interaction with Apex works with these products. So if you just go to the help Salesforce.com, we can post it later to the chatter group, the specific pages where you can find help around that.
Wonderful. So
I see a question here. I'd like to be able to edit a process rather than create a new version. Is that coming? Yes, it is. So, well, it is in a couple ways. So we've got versions, and you can clone a process and save it either as a new process or as a version. But you can't edit a process that is active, and that's to protect the processes that are in flight. But you can make another version of it and then swap it out. So the way that if you have a process that's already running and in production, and business processes change all the time, so we know you need to edit these things. So what you do is you make another version, you edit that process, you save it, and then you hit activate to the edited one. And then what that does is it deactivates the old one, and it switches it with the newest, the updated version that you just built. So that's how you manage through that.
I'm just looking through. So again, thank you everyone for posting so many questions onto the workflow automation group. And definitely, this is not the only time that you can post questions to that group. So if you have found and hopefully joined this the Success Community Salesforce Workflow Automation group, I encourage you, as you're building with processes as you're going through Trailhead, to continue to post those questions. And also, I see some questions in the chat around links. We do actually have in the sidebar here, we have the link directly to that Trailhead module for Process Builder in the sidebar of the workflow group, as well as limits and considerations. So again, Shelley, is there any last questions that you wanted to address before we?
Yeah, there was one more. Because I hear this a lot. Will it be possible to soon have Process Builder trigger on a record deletion? And that's a really popular ask, and it's part of our vision for this whole eventing system and for allowing essentially you to define more and have more choices in defining how and when you trigger a process. So it will be part of that effort, but that is a very common one, which is fire this process when a record is deleted. It's not a short-term thing we'll be able to deliver, but as part of this eventing system, it is part of that vision. So it's more of the sort of medium long-term.
Wonderful. So thank you so much, Shelley. This has been really meaningful. I know we're seeing a lot of comments on Twitter and on the community how educational this has been. So thank you everyone for joining very much. Please join the Success Automation group if you have questions that maybe we didn't get to answer today. And the recording for this will be posted on the registration page that you originally registered for this webinar, so that'll be sent out as well. So again, thank you so much, Shelley, for giving us some more clarity and details and exciting roadmap information around Process Builder. And good luck, everyone, with building out your processes.
Great, thank you. And thank you to the community for being so active and helping each other out. It's fantastic.
So with that, we're going to finish the webinar. Again, please continue to post those questions if they didn't get answered today, and we look forward to hearing everyone's stories about the processes that they're creating and their success with Trailhead and Process Builder.